Hello again. Happy Thursday. May the 4th be with you. Happy National Star Wars Day to everyone celebrating out there. Maybe we'll get some cool news. Yes, I continue to be such a Star Wars nerd. I just look at my bookshelf for those that watch on YouTube, look at my bookshelf to the right. It is virtually all Star Wars books. Most of them I have read. But of course, this is a Pittsburgh Penguins show. For today's episode, we're going to continue our season reviews with Jeff Carter. And yeah, I think you all know where that's going, but maybe there'll be a surprise or two in there. We'll also get into players who I think could bounce back. I know just looking at some bounce back candidates for next season, how many the Penguins have, plus a potential goaltending option if this player is cleared to play next season. Right now, it's a little bit murky, but it could be an option for a team that is currently playing right now. So all that plus so much more coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @LOSOPenguins. And, of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen today. We're being available on all platforms. So let's jump right into it. Our second bottom six players to get a season review for this past season is everyone's favorite, just whipping bag, whatever words you want to use to describe Jeff Carter, because yes, whipping boy, I should say. It's just screwing that up. That was embarrassing. Jeff Carter doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that he did struggle this season, but did have 13 goals, 29 points, 79 games. That's still a little bit step down from where he was last year when he had 19 goals and 45 points in 76 games. I don't usually like looking at plus minus. I think it's a very flawed stat. You can look at a whole bunch of other stats before you get to plus minus, but he was a minus 16 this year. That is horrendous. That is his lowest plus minus year since 2019-20 when he was at minus 21. Again, very low hanging fruit stat to use, but I thought it was relevant to put out there because I'm not surprised that he was a minus 16, considering that Mike Sullivan really screwed him over with some deployment. I think he maybe have a little bit of a better season if it weren't for Sullivan thinking that he's a prime Patrice Bergeron over here still. But the counting stats, for a fourth line center, 13 goals, 30 points, that's fine. But they were using him as a third line center. I'm sorry, 13 goals, 30 points. That is not good enough for me as a third line center. It's not. And his underlyings this season, played in 79 games, 833 minutes of ice time. When he was on the ice, the Penguins only had 47% of the shot attempts, a little higher than it was last year. Well, it was 47.0%. This year it's 47.4%, so kind of the same. But this has been a downward trajectory for the last couple of years. In 2020, 2021 with the Penguins, he had 53% of the shot attempts, but after that, 49%, 47%, and 47% for this year. 24 goals for on the ice, 41 goals against for 36.9% of the actual goals for. The expected goal share when Carter was on the ice, the Penguins only had 49% of that. Scoring chance-wise, the Penguins only had 48% of those. High danger chances, 46.8% of those. And then 13 high danger goals for, 26 high danger goals against. That is pathetic. And then he only shot 5.7% this season. So yeah, the underlyings, they match the eye test with how brutal he was. And again, I will say this. A good chunk of it is his fault, but I also do put a little bit of blame on Mike Sullivan for still thinking that he is a prime defensive player. I don't know if Sullivan was trying to just stick it to Ron Hextall all the time by just giving a nice FU to him. Like, oh, you're going to give me this contract. Oh, I'm just going to put him out there in high leverage situations. But it was very weird to see him out there in every high leverage situation, especially down the stretch, when they were defending leads. For example, that game against the Islanders, they blew that 2-goal lead with less than 6 minutes left. He's out there trying to ice the game. Don't know why. It all started earlier in the season. That first blown lead against Montreal, remember they were up 2-0 going into the third period. Half score lead, make it 2-1. But you get down to the nitty gritty. Less than 3 minutes left. They pull the goalie. Carter's out there in no man's land, and the Habs tied up thanks to Cole Caulfield when he was healthy. Don't know what he's doing there. You have the game against the Blues, excuse me, late in this season, remember, where the Blues had just tied the game. The Penguins have been winning the whole time. Jordan Binnington was standing on his head. And in the final minute of regulation, Carter's out there for some reason. It's like, what are we doing here? So I'm not blaming him for that. I'm also not blaming him for signing that contract. If you are in your late 30s and you get offered that kind of deal for 2 years and you're making over $3 million, hell yeah, I'm going to take that contract. Like, you'd be a fool not to, people. Come on. So, again, it's on Ron Hextall for him giving him that contract in the first place. He was the first player that was signed during that very important offseason last year. Can you believe that still? Can you believe that? It's just crazy to me. It's absolutely nuts. But, yeah, I mean, his play on the ice this season, his defensive metrics stunk. Offensively, I mean, sure, he had 13 goals, but, a couple of those really came towards the late stage of the season. I will say his play did improve a little bit down the stretch as we got closer to the playoffs, even though the Penguins didn't make it. I think if he can play like that and actually score a little bit more next season, that deal is not going to be as bad. Obviously, in a perfect world, he's not on the team next year, but we don't live in that situation. It's useless to talk about him not being on the team next season because he is going to be on the team next season unless you can convince him to somehow waive that no trade clause, no move clause. That's not going to happen though. So he's going to be here and he's probably going to play this last final year of the Penguins before he walks off into the sunset, probably retires, to be honest. But in terms of a role for next season, assuming he is on the team again, probably will be. You probably need to have him on the fourth line. He can't be your third line center. That's another thing I'm looking forward to for this offseason with the new front office coming in. They need to go out and get a new third line center for this team. I haven't touched on that enough because I've been focusing on the goaltending and getting a new number one, number two left-handed defenseman to play with Letang or Petrie. But they need to go out there and get a new third line center. The answer to that position on the roster right now, for the roster, excuse me, the answer to that position is not on the roster, the current roster. It's not down the minors. It is on another team. Or it's going to be a free agent. That's just the reality of the situation. I'm sorry. Carter, his numbers were terrible this season. They got a little bit better when you put him on the fourth line. You have to shelter him. That's the only way this is going to work for next season is if he is sheltered on the fourth line and maybe play some minutes with, Drew O'Connor. Maybe you get him away from him. I don't know. Whoever you put with Carter, it's going to be tough, but he can still provide, I guess, a little bit of value on faceoffs. I don't really buy into that much, though. Gives you maybe a little bit more value on the PK. I'd still choose a whole bunch of other players over him, though. But, he needs to be playing not many minutes a night. If I had it my way, obviously he wouldn't be on the team next season, but we don't live in that reality. He's going to be on the team. He needs to be the fourth line. He needs to be the fourth line center or whatever. But the team needs a third line center. He's not the answer to that. And in terms of production, I'm looking forward to next season. If he can have that kind of production for a fourth line role, I think I'm mainly, I'm not, I guess, how do I want to say it? I guess I'm more okay with it if he's getting shelter minutes and he still provides almost 15 goals and 30, 35 points. That's not terrible for a fourth line player. But in terms of what they're paying him to be on the third line, that's not good enough. But I still want to see, I want to see him have that kind of production, if not a little bit better for next season. It's going to be hard for him to bounce back, I guess, in a way, because he looks cooked. But fourth line role is what I'm looking at for him next season. But he was dreadful this year. Didn't really do much of anything. It was very weird how the coaching staff would always defend him after every turn. Maybe with a new front office coming in, the answers will be a little bit different. But, who knows? But that's my season review in terms of Jeff Carter. Let me know what you all expect him for next season. Do you think he can put up the same sort of production? Would you have him on the fourth line role? Do you also think this team needs a new third line center and that they cannot play him in that role? Let me know down in the comments. You can also send me a DM on social media and all of that. So that wraps up this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to get into players who I feel like could have bounce back seasons next year. There's not many of them, but there's a couple of them that I do think could have it just based on how they played this season. But before we get into that, if you're looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever. Built. You have to try this. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing, you won't even think they're good for you. You have to try this. And what makes them so good? Well, for starters, they are covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. They only have 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. You can get your specialty flavors still at Built.com. And that's right. Go to Walmart or Sam's Club. Go get Batter Puff, Churro Puff, Cookies and Cream, Double Chocolate, or Coconut Puff. You can thank me later when it comes to that. All right, I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. And follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at El Orso Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So this might be a little bit short in terms of players who I think could bounce back for next season. You know, it's just when you look at the top 6 for this team, you know, I think everyone performed at the level you would expect them to. I mean, maybe Rickard Rakell, 30 goals. Maybe some people didn't see that coming. Jason Zucker, some people didn't see that coming. Still, 25, 30 goals. Sidney Gino played 82 games. Brian Rust, you know, I guess we can start there. I already touched on his season review. If he can bounce back a little bit at 5-on-5 next season and on the power play and up his shooting percentage, I think that would be huge for this team. But overall, the top 6 doesn't really have much to think about when it comes to bouncing back. A player who I do, and we'll get to his season review a little later on in the offseason, that I do think could bounce back is Jeff Petrie. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, to see that, he underwhelmed this season. It was not the prettiest, to say the least. His underlyings this year, to say the least. 5 goals, 31 points, 61 games, counting stats wise. Underlings, again. So when he was on the Penguins, it had 51% of the shot attempts. But I was still very high on the trade when he came over for Matheson. I thought that he was going to provide a really nice 1-2 punch for the Penguins on the right side of their defense. I was wrong. I don't think he was bad per se. I just thought he was very underwhelming. And sure, was he a bit banged up at times? Yes, but even when he was healthy for a good stretch of the season, he didn't really wow me. I think that's partly because he's on the wrong side of 30. This is usually when the play for defensemen starts to go down the hill a little bit. He just didn't really do much of anything for this season. I expected him to contribute a bit more offensively and especially defensively. He didn't do either one, but he's under contract for the next several years, make $6.25 million. That's tough. I mean, I don't expect him to go anywhere. You could potentially have him on the trade market, but I think you're going to have to pay draft picks to see him walk away. But then you have to decide who to replace him with, because I don't want Jarnbrugge taking second pairing minutes. I think that would be a little ludicrous on the Penguins' part to expect him to just take those minutes and then who's behind Jarnbrugge, assuming he's on the team. Mark Friedman. Who else is down there in Wilkes-Barre and stuff? Chad Riedel. He can play on the right side as well. But I don't know, man. And not the greatest. So I expect him to be on the team next season, but he is a bounce back candidate. I just don't know how much you can expect at this point, during his career. Already touched on Carter. If he can have a similar type season, maybe add a little bit more offense for next year, that'd be awesome. But he's almost 40 now. How much do you truly expect him to play better for next season? I think that's, my biggest thing when it comes to that. If you want to put this player on it, this might be a little, I don't want to say it. I guess if you want to put Chris Letang, that's fair too, because his season was a little bit up and down. I still think he had a pretty good season overall, but with a fully healthy off season, I think he could really show off next season, even though he's getting a little bit older. He's hopefully not dealing with, a lot of stuff off the ice with, another stroke or another family member passing away. He just really went through the ringer this season, and I felt horrible. I just never thought he just got his feet off the ground, and you can see that. Again, still had a pretty good season, but not the season that maybe I and a lot of other people envisioned that he would have. Other than that, there's really not too many other bounce back candidates on this team. People may, if Mikhail Granlund's on the team, people will say him. I am sorry. I don't really think you can bounce back after having 1 goal in 21 games for your team. It's just, that's no. And honestly, he shouldn't even be on the team because, again, when we get to a season review, he had 1 garbage time goal in 21 games. He can't really play defensively. He can't shoot well enough. His passing is the only good part of his game, but even I didn't really notice that during his time here in Pittsburgh. They should be trying to save that cap space whenever a new GM is hired. So, I'm not really looking towards that. So, when it really comes down to it, there's not too many bounce back candidates, but there are still a couple. When it comes to Brian Ross, Chris Letang, and Jeff Carter, if you even want to consider him in there, if they do bring back Tristan Jarry, you can throw him into there as well. But do you really expect him to be back at this point? I think I'd rather just move on and try to get someone via the trade market. But if he does come back, I think it's going to be a short-term deal. Outside of that, I'm looking at the defense. I mean, maybe Chad Riedel. I think you could add him to the mix. Casey DeSmith, though his numbers this season, they were kind of on par with where he was last season, the year before. But in terms of DeSmith, I just want to see him be more consistent next season just because, when I was talking about with Danny Shirey earlier this week, he has so many of these starts where he's so good and looks like nothing's going to get past him. And then he'll have another start where it's like, what the hell was that? So I just want to see a little more consistency from him for next season. I guess if you want to call that bouncing back, that's fair. Chad Riedel, I thought he was not nearly as good this season as he was last year. His underlines kind of went down a little bit. His counting stats are going to be what they are every year. He's not going to put up too many points, but still, I thought his play away from the puck was not good. He was taking too many penalties in the late stages of the games that were costing the Penguins points in the standings. I do think, especially because, the Penguins, they're not going to stay healthy next season. They almost never do. Considering that he's probably going to be on the team, obviously he's under contract. I would think, he is in line for a bounce back as well as like the number 7 or number 8 defenseman on this team. So those are just my bounce back candidates for next season. Let me know what you all think. Do you think anyone else should be on this list? Do you agree with mine? Do you think that some of these players will not be bouncing back next year? Let me know in the comments. Send me DMs as well. But I figure this will be like a cool little segment to discuss, who I think could be potentially on the list to bounce back next season after some really rough 2022, 2023 campaigns. And wanted to discuss it. It's a fun one to discuss just because, there are a lot of players that play well this season, but there are also a good chunk that I think this team will need more of next season, especially if these players are on the team. So that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins. Not this episode, this segment of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Coming up to end the show, we're going to get into a goalie option that a listener actually sent in this morning and why he could make sense if he is allowed to play next season. It's not, he didn't really, do anything wrong, but he is in the players assistant program. He's on a personal leave from his team. So that's all coming up right after this commercial break. All right, I'm back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Huner Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Huner Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter, LRT Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen today. We're free and available on all platforms. So a listener sent me this morning and talked about a goaltender option for next season. And it's a bit murky right now, obviously, just because he's not really playing. But he sent me Spencer Knight of the Florida Panthers. This came out a couple months ago, but this was back in February, so a little over 2 months ago. When Spencer Knight, he is in the NHLPA's player assistance program. He's taking a leave of absence from the team. And as the description says, it's available to all players and their families. It aids those who are going through mental health, substance abuse, or other issues. And he's not believed to be dealing with drug or alcohol related issues. So this could, I know I'm not trying to speculate anything. It could be mental health. I don't really know what he's going through right now. He's continuing to get paid while receiving treatment. He's going to return to the club when clear for on-ice competition by the program administrator. So this is similar to what Jakub Vrana went through. Remember when he was in Detroit, they reassigned him to their farm team. They put him on waivers. He eventually came out of the players assistance program, and he was traded by Detroit to the St. Louis Blues. And he ended up playing really well. And I'm happy for him because he's always been a really good talent when he's on the ice. It was, really sad to, just unfortunate to see a great talent, not playing. But, he got the care that he needed. And I think right now he showed during the late stages in the Blues that, he can still very much play. And I think the same can be said for Spencer Knight. This quote came from Florida Hockey Now when he came in, and Jordan Newman. So this was Knight's agent. He said, we're all concerned about Spencer's well-being. The organization has been outstanding and cooperative every step of the way. We're looking forward to him returning to play in the near future. So I'm just hoping everything is okay. And assuming that he is fine and that he gets cleared to return from the Players Assistance Program, I think he could be an option to trade for. Because, look at the Panthers' goaltending options. Sergei Bobrovsky, he's not going anywhere with that contract. They have Alex Lyon, who really came up out of nowhere this season. I think he's shown that he can be at least a perfectly fine, adequate backup. And honestly, Knight's numbers, they're not too terrible when he's playing. He played 21 games this season, 9-8-1 record, 901 save percentage, 3.18 goals against average. But before that, when he made his debut in 2020, 2021, only played 4 games, 919 save percentage. Last year, played 32 games, 908 save percentage, 2.79 goals against average. He only has 57 games to his name, 49 starts, 32 and 17 and 6 with a 906 save percentage. So he is above league average. I think you would need to see what he can do in a full season. I believe his cap hit is, I believe it's around a little over $4 million. I can actually double check that real quickly here for the Panthers. If I can make sure I get this here. He is under contract for next season. If I can just find this here. So yeah, it's going to be up to 4.5 starting next season for the next 3 years. That would be a big commitment for the Penguins to make, especially if he is clear to come out of the Players Assistance Program. It's an option. I don't know how good of one it is because, again, there's only 57 games to his name, and it's a big cap hit. You'll be committing a decent amount of money, but it's still potentially a decent option on the trade market if you don't want to bring back Tristan Jarry. But again, this all determines this all hedges on the fact that he is going to be cleared to come out of the Players Assistance Program. Because again, I hope everything is okay. I don't know what's wrong. He's receiving care. Assuming that he does get cleared and it's nothing like brutally bad or anything, that he's never going to play again and stuff. He's definitely an option. I think the Penguins in this new management staff, they could look at, to say the least. Again, numbers aren't bad. Contract's the only thing that it's maybe giving me a little bit pause because 3 more years, $4.5 million for someone who's only played 57 games. That's a little risky, if you ask me. But it's also risky to bring back Tristan Jarry, considering that he can't stay healthy, even if it's on a 1 or 2 year deal. Even if you bring back Tristan, you probably can't bring back to Smith because you can't run that tandem back, for a 4th straight season. So I wanted to put another goalie option out there, again, assuming that he is allowed to play next season and that he has been receiving care and that he feels good enough to come out of this program and be bound to playing hockey. Because, again, his well-being is the utmost importance right now. And I really do hope that he is okay, just like how I was really rooting for Jakub Vrana when he entered that. And I'll root for anyone that enters that Players Assistance Program. But let me know what you all think about that as a goaltender option. If he is clear to come out of it, do you think he would be a good goalie for the Penguins for the next few years? Are you concerned about his contract if he gets clear to come out? Let me know what you all think down in the comments. And you also send me DMs and all that. But that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I really appreciate all of you listening / watching. We'll be back with another episode for you all on Friday on Cinco de Mayo to wrap up this week. We'll continue doing everyday episodes through the first week or two of July. I know it's a quiet time. That does not mean there's nothing to talk about. There's always stuff to discuss when it comes to this wonderful ice hockey franchise we have in the Steel City. But again, thank you all so much for listening / watching. Really appreciate it. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Friday. I'll talk to you all then.